I said 15, but I said now I'm saying 10. Yeah.
I'm on the timer then, so I'll have to talk fast. First of all, I am Pat Harris. I am running for the United States Senate. I am not a politician, but as close as I've come is generally when I go through airports, I don't know, about once a month somebody walks up and says, "You know, you look a lot like Joe Biden." I was actually, as a lawyer, I was doing a trial. During the trial, I had to do a mistaken identity test. And I got a argument. I'll answer the 4 questions that I get asked. First, why are you running? The reason's pretty simple for me. I believe we are at a unique time in our history. I understand that our current senator's policy and philosophy has always been to compromise and work across the aisle. While I think that is an admirable philosophy, and I do think there are times in our country's history that is important, I think we are at a unique point, and I believe we cannot try to work and compromise with the other party when they're not willing to do anything other than vote against everything that we suggest or bring up. I think we need fighters. I think we have people who have to get in there and mix it up and have to be willing to fight. My first inclination, in fact, the strongest inclination I had to run, came with the Merrick Garland Supreme Court nomination. I believe that was a travesty. I believe it was a constitutional travesty. As a lawyer, I think it was actually a constitutional crisis. The Democrats, I feel like, with the Merrick Garland situation, there was a little bit of pushback, but there was very little.
Right.
They should have shut the government down over that. You know, Ted Cruz shuts the government down every time he has a hangnail. We should have raised holy hell and not gone forward on anything until that nomination was secured. But I think what the Democrats did was they thought, well, you know, Hillary's going to get elected, so it'll be all right. We'll work it out. It's exactly the kind of thing that's gotten us in the situation we are now. We have to have people who are willing to fight. That got me so angry, I said, I'm going to consider running. And the more I looked at it, the angrier I got. I said, you know, I believe strongly we've got to have people who will fight. So that next question becomes, why you? I am a criminal defense and civil rights lawyer, have been for 23 years in California. Every single day of my life, what I've done is I've gotten up and fought. I get up in court and I fight for people who are guilty. And I fight for people who are innocent. And I fight for people who have money. And I fight for people who have no money. And I fought for people of every race, creed, color, sexual orientation. But every single day, I get up and fight for people because that's what I believe in. I'm a strong believer that criminal defense attorneys and civil rights attorneys, it is our job to defend the Constitution, and that's what we should fight for every day, and that's what I've been doing. In doing so, I've taken on some of the biggest corporations and adversaries in the country. I've taken on Pfizer. I've taken on Wells Fargo. I fought Bank of America. I fought the Catholic Church over the sexual abuse of children in a case down in San Jose and won. Some of you may remember a gentleman named Kenneth Starr. At the time, back in the 90s, I was actually romantically involved with a woman named Susan McDougal, who got involved in the whole Whitewater mess. We took on Kenneth Starr for 6 years, and we ended up beating him in a court of law. I'm not afraid to take on anybody, and I'm willing to do it, and I believe that's what's got to be done. The next question becomes then, all right, what is it you stand for? What is it you believe in, and what is it you're going to fight for? First, I believe in Medicare for all and single-payer health care system. That's number one. Number two, I believe that we have to reform the criminal justice system. I believe we have to get bail reform, and I believe we must eliminate for-profit prisons. Number three, and I got sort of tickled the other night. We were talking at an event, and one of my opponents stood up and said, kind of gave the rabble-rousing speech about what we need equal pay for women. And I sat there and I thought, let's see, when did I hear that? 1978. That's the first time. And it's never, ever been dealt with. We continue to talk about it. I'm sick and tired of politicians getting up and saying, We need equal pay for women. Gets a great applause line. Everybody goes, yeah, that's right. And then, okay, how are you going to do it?
Isn't about you're right.
Well, I'll tell you the way I propose to do it, and I've talked about this for several months now. It's a three-part plan called the 3 I's. Before you get to the 3 I's, the first thing you got to do is you got to cut money from the Defense Department, take it, put it to the EEOC to deal with cases of equal pay. Now, the 3 I's are this. You investigate corporations and groups, especially those with government contracts, but you can do it with all companies. Number 2, you incentivize them to make sure that, for example, if they're not following the rules or not providing equal pay, you help them in terms of tax credits, or you incentivize them in terms of ways to help raise the business with government contracts or so forth. If they refuse to do that, you indict them. And you can civilly indict them in this country through the Department of Justice. It's done all the time in cases involving other minorities. It can be done for women as well. And while I've been talking about this for several months, lo and behold, some of you may notice last week, the country of Iceland passed this exact thing.
That's right.
It can be done, and it should be done. Fourth thing I talk about we need to cut the Defense Department budget. The Defense Department has been allowed to run rampant in this country based on fear and based on this constant trying to feed fear to us. We have to cut the Defense Department budget. My opponent in this, one of the things I have, the biggest problem I have, is she has been a huge proponent of funding the Defense Department at record levels, including voting for this last one, which was $50 billion more than Donald Trump asked for. Now, I quote a study. How much time have I got, by the way?
Sorry. 4 minutes.
Okay.
No, 3 minutes and 40 seconds.
I gotta run through this. There was a study done, an audit done by the Defense Department, because interestingly enough, the Defense Department can't be audited except themselves. They audited themselves. It got buried. It got fortunately leaked to the New York Times. What was determined in the audit, there was $125 billion in waste over 5 years in administrative costs. We're not talking about weapons, wars. We're talking about copy paper, staples, staplers, administrative costs that they were paying. $125 billion. You think about what you can do with $125 billion in this country. First and foremost, I give the example, that same time, during that same time period, the Alzheimer's Foundation went to Congress and asked for $5 billion because they believe they are very close to solving the issues of the disease of Alzheimer's. $5 billion. Congress gave them 1.5. Okay? Think about what that could have done. Think about what it could have done. I go back to the quote from Winston Churchill from World War II, when he was approached about defense cuts, defense spending. And one of his ministers said, you know, we can raise some funds, we can cut education, we can cut culture, we can cut some back on some of the health care. And Winston Churchill looked at him and said, well, exactly what are we fighting for then? That's where we are in this country. We're to continue to fund the Defense Department, but what exactly are we fighting for? We should be funding scientific research, we should be funding medical technology, we should be funding the environment and the ability to fight global warming. Lastly, I talk about corporate welfare. Corporate welfare is the biggest absolute travesty in this country, and I'll tell you, we just let it keep going. This tax bill was a corporate just giveaway. I believe very strongly that we have to go back and go backward to where we were as far as corporate taxes. I believe very strongly that what we need to be doing is we need to be cutting regulations and taxes on small businesses and not Wall Street companies. That's the biggest problem we have. Well, every time a Republican goes up there and says, I'm going to cut your taxes and I'm going to cut your regulations, what they're saying is, I'm going to cut the wealthy's taxes and I'm going to cut Wall Street corporations' regulations. That's what happens. We need to get back to working men and women. In this country, the biggest problem we have is politicians are bought and paid for. This flow of corporate money going in, it is absolutely crazy. They are, and I don't care, sometimes it goes to Democratic politicians who are very much progressive and liberal, and I like them, but the same thing's happening with many of them as well. We've got to stop it. There are 4 ways to do it. I don't have time to go into that obviously right now. I'd be happy to talk to you about it later on. But there are 4 different ways we can approach it. But we've got to stop corporate money. I don't take corporate donations. I will not take corporate donations. I believe very strongly that we have to have individuals donating to campaigns. Because of that, I'm asking you if you'd like to talk to me tonight, if you feel some desire to pull out your wallets or checkbooks, somebody's got $2 million they want, I'll take it, I promise you. I'll settle for 10. I'll settle for 25. Anyway, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I think that's the end. The last thing I'm going to say is, we came up here, our whole strategy is to go around to the rural caucuses and the rural counties, because I think that's where we need to be listening to people, where we ought to be out talking to people, because you're the people who know how Trump got elected and why he got elected, because you're neighbors, you're dealing with them. We have a philosophy, one of my staff members said, the redder the better, because that's where we're going. We're going to go talk to them. We're going to convince them. And that's what we're here to do. We have 100 people that are being bussed outside, that we just put together. It is solar powered inside, totally solar powered. It is being converted to ethanol. Everything in it is renewable, floors, everything. After this meeting's over, we'll hang around. I'll ask questions. You'll have trouble getting rid of me. I'll be happy to talk. After it's over, if you want to take a look at the bus, feel free on that. Thank you. I'm sorry it was 11 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming all that way. Mr. Brown, has an announcement?
Yes, I do. It's actually on the agenda.